Marshall in the middle.
You are, you're a surprising individual, right? You, ever since like I met you when you were an officer basic course student
Uh-huh.
back in the early 2000s, and you were a star, back then. You were,
That's too kind.
well, I mean, look, I thought you were, and everybody around you thought you were, and I think it's interesting that you lead out with "I'm going to surprise you tonight," so I can't wait. I can like you are a leader among leaders. You have what you got your military mentor organization that you lead, you're a part of, and you have a whole coalition of folks that you've developed around you. How many students have you taught? Right? Think about it just for a second. And
Yeah.
since you've been, and when I met you, you were a student. You were a student, and you were still considered a peer leader. So yeah, you're gonna surprise me tonight. Surprise me, sir. I want to hear all about it. I want to hear all about it. I'm not so sure that you can, surprise me, but we're here with Lieutenant Colonel Chevy Cook, and we're not doing this live. I'm not going to do it
Yeah.
live. One of the things that I realized as I began to do more and more live that actually the extra people became a distraction to what I was trying to do. And I didn't realize it kind of at first, but over time, you start looking back on it, and then you get mentors that say, "Hey, have you thought about it like this?" And it's like, so anyway, so here we are. You and I just kind of hanging out in a chat, and the idea uh, came from Robert Maggett, was a buddy of mine, a jump master instructor with me. He served with you,
Hmm.
wonderful leader and mentor. I got a call from his wonderful wife one day and said, "Hey, Rob is not doing well. He can't remember things." And I was like, "I've got to call Rob and get him on the phone and tell stories." And so that was the start of Heroes I Know. And so we've done, like 150 interviews now, and the idea is to tell our stories before we're too old or too sick to tell them, right? Because tomorrow you could go to the doctor for a routine physical checkup, and they're like, "Hey, Chevy, what's wrong with your left foot over here?" And then
Oh yeah.
next thing you know, you just never know, right? Your blood work looks kind of funny, right? We've had leaders that were our right ahead of us, just fall dead in our
Oh
tracks.
yeah.
The battalion had Colonel Pruitt just pass
Yeah.
away, just on a soccer field one day. He was just what a beloved leader, right? So that's where this is coming from, and that's kind of why we're doing this. Tell me about young. Was Chevy always your nickname?
So yeah, as growing up, it just kind of stuck. My mom actually worked at a Ford dealership, so it was a joke to start. And then in elementary school, remember, you go through the things alphabetical and they start reading the names. And I remember very early on, just they would always mess up my real name, Chaveso. And I would get everything under the sun. Chavasco, like Tabasco sauce with a CH. I'd get cerveza, which is, Spanish for beer. And when they start like doing that thing, I was just like, hey, Chevy. So I've been introducing myself like Chevy, like the car, since then. And actually, in high school, when I went to get my permit, I signed my name, and my mom, she's like, "What did you sign?" And I was like, "I wrote my name." She's like, "What'd you sign?" And I was like, "I wrote Chevy Cook on there." She was like, "This is a legal document, binding. Like, you wrote your nickname on there. That's not your name." And I was like, "Oh yeah." So it's always kind of stuck around. Now that I'm a little bit older and I appreciate legal documentation, I will introduce myself as Chaveso Chevy Cook, and all my business cards say Chevy with a little kind of quotes around it in the middle, because a lot of people know me as that. So yeah.
That's great, right? So you were like, so what's your favorite car?
Oh, singular car. Favorite brand is obviously Chevy because I'm a arrogant bastard. But I actually own my favorite car. I have a 1977 Chevrolet Corvette. Um, for those that are not familiar with the 70s era vets, they're on the back end of the muscle cars, so they're not a super strong or sexy car, but the curves on it looks like a Batmobile. It's the one with the humps. Everyone knows the long humped hood. And I just growing up in the, for me, I'm only 42, so growing up in the 80s, I remember seeing those 70s cars, and I just thought they were so cool and unmistakable. And I always grew up wanting one. And when I was at LT, when I met you in OBC, I actually was I was driving a motorcycle, and it was just a little bit too dangerous. So when I had my first kid, I was like, "Hey, sweetie, I want to get rid of the motorcycle." She was like, "What? What do you want?" And I was like, "Hey, I always wanted a vet." So I searched long and high for one, and I got one, and I've had it since.
Tell me about your high school sweetheart and your beautiful wife, right? Y'all are a love story that is an interesting thing, right? You were a senior in high school. She was way younger than you. It was probably
Yes,
scandalous at the time. Um,
especially in the South for sure.
yeah, tell me about that. Take me there. Take me about seeing her. Do you remember seeing her the first time?
Yeah, so there's an interesting. We have many an interesting story being together for 2 dozen years now. But here's the original story. She lived on a good side of town. I did not. I rode a bus for 2 hours to go to high school. 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. Yes, I woke up at 5 a.m. to catch the bus at my house. And when we got out of school, when I didn't have practice, I was on the bus for 2 more hours back across town. And I was just trying to go to a better school across town. And my mom hooked me up with that. The school that I could ride a bike to, they were shooting people. They had metal detectors. So my mom was like, "You're not doing that." So I go to school across town. And Ashley was in a neighborhood full of folks that I was friends with from that side of town. And when I started playing sports like cross country, track, and playing football and all of that, they were these kind of guys at my age that had like younger siblings and sisters, brothers and sisters. And she was cool with a number of my best friends' kind of younger sisters, but I never kind of bumped into her till the first day of school, 1998. And here I am in some extra class at the end of the day. It was like study hall or something like that. Something I was going to absolutely take off my schedule. And it was only for upperclassmen, but there was this freshman in there, and it was her. It was Ashley. And I didn't know who she was. And I remember bumping my elbow in my friend Greg Johnson, who was on the football team with me. I was like, "Hey, Greg, that girl over there, she's cute. She's going to be all right when she grows up." And fast forward, I noticed she was riding with one of my football players' younger sisters. She's riding in a car with her. And I was like, "Hey, what's her name and everything?" And she told me some name, and I was like, "I'm just gonna call her Janika's friend." That was the girl's name, Janika. And every time I saw her because I was, a senior or whatever, I'd rib on her. Like I'd always say like, "Hey, Janika's friend," and she's like, "I got a name," and all of that. And I just kept doing that for weeks and weeks. And then eventually I asked one of her friends, I was like, "Hey, what's her name again?" And our friend Angie Hunter says, "Her name's Ashley. She's looking for a boyfriend. She likes you. You want a number?" And then Ashley gave me a note. It said, "Call me if you have the time, 782-3514." And I still have that note from 1998.
That's like getting like a miracle sent to you from heaven, right? A little
Yeah.
note with the little phone number on it, right? That George Strait got the Check Yes or No
Yep.
song, a
Yep.
little note. You've
Oh,
got
yeah.
this note. That's so cool. Wow.
It's
That is
upstairs, right?
awesome.
It's on our mantle right now. It's behind we have a picture of ourselves in high school from 98 that we keep. It's a panoramic photo. You can't even get those anymore. And it sits right behind it. Still
So
have it.
what city were you in?
That was Columbia, South Carolina. We're both from Columbia, South Carolina. She was born and raised there. I actually was born in Tampa, Florida, and then eventually moved there with an aunt. But yeah, we're from Columbia, South Carolina. Went to AC Flora High School. Last year, I won the state championship in football. Was not what we were doing when I was on that football team back in the day. But yeah, been, and my mom still lives in the same house, across town from her. and her mom still lives in the same house too. When we go visit, I stay in my same house that I grew up in.
So tell me what it was like to be young, Chevy Cook. Did you have a routine? Were you in church every Sunday? Were you out of church every Sunday? Were you in trouble all the time? Were you the smart nerdy kid? Did you ride mopeds regularly?
It was like a mix of all of that, really. I did grow up in the church, Southern Baptist. My aunt was a preacher. So she was, when we in the 80s, you're like getting like parts cut in your hair and stuff. She's like, that's the sign of the devil. Don't do stuff like that. So, we went to church every Sunday. I tried to stay out of trouble. I was in a lot of sports. I grew up getting in trouble though. That neighborhood was filled with drugs and the normal hooligans and shenanigans. Actually, first time I saw a dead body was in my yard from a shootout. People used to traverse my yard. The way our neighborhood is set up, there's a front street, a middle street, and a back street. I'm on the middle street. There's a path in between all of them. The path cuts right through my yard. So one night, people were kind of traversing through there, shooting at each other, and lo and behold, it was kind of like a scene in Boys in the Hood, or a lot of actual movies. You want to go see a dead body, and we all went, and it was like literally in my front yard on the kind of end. Yeah, so I grew up around that kind of stuff, and my mom was like, "Hey, the only way you're going to get away from this is if you go get educated and you stay in sports and stuff like that," which is why I went to school 2 miles across town. So I didn't grow up like hunting or anything like that. I just grew up kind of involved in a lot of different sports: baseball, football, track, cross country, anything that had a ball or involved running. And then eventually I was like one of those ROTC nerdy kids, which has led to the path I'm on now. And that was literally because I was playing all the sports. So I didn't want to take PE too. So I was like, well, what's an equivalent for PE? And they were like, you can take JR Army JROTC. And I was like, what's
World
that?
where you had a choice between TC, that was like a choice that for some it was like, ooh, you took ROTC and it was a bad thing. Other people it was like, you're on ROTC, it was weird, right? Remember those days?
It was, we called them the pickle soup mafia because they were, they were wearing the green, the green things. But, interestingly enough, my friend Omar Armstrong, he was a year ahead of me in school. We're same age. He was in it and he made it seem like it was cool. And he is a cool guy. We're best friends to this day. He's the deputy director of my nonprofit. We've been around each other since we were 12 or 13. And he just made it look cool. So I was like, well, Omar's in it. So I got in it too. And for a lot of things that led me on the path I'm on now. If I had never been in that class, I don't think I would be in the Army.
Amen. So
I had two gentlemen that were Vietnam veterans, Paul Thomas Grimes and Sergeant Major James Sanderson. Thomas Grimes was a retired lieutenant colonel. They had multiple tours in Vietnam. James Sanderson is a Purple Heart recipient, and I didn't grow up with a father in the house, and they were fathers for me. And they kept me out of shenanigans in high school, and they introduced me to things like the Army and West Point and all these kind of other things. The first time I shot a rifle because I didn't hunt was in RTC at Fort Jackson summer camp, and it just seemed cool. And I was like, I guess I'll do that.
What was it like when you were a kid? What kind of dreams did you have of growing up? Like while you're in elementary school and you're running around before you get corrupted by, girls with cooties and stuff. What did you think about you were going to do?
That's a good question. I always thought I was going to be I wanted to be a lawyer because it sounded right. It was like, get out of the hood, make a lot of money, have a suit and tie and a nice car. But I was never I never trusted the law or legality or anything. Just the neighborhood I grew up in, that just wasn't the case. So that faded, but I could draw. And I thought, well, what can I do if I want to draw? And somebody told me about being an architect. So I grew up actually through middle school wanting to be an architect. And then when I got in high school, And had been in drafting classes and some interesting kind of club things like that. I found out how boring it is to be an architect and how it's all like about angles and math and all that other kind of. I'm not a super rule follower, so it just didn't seem interesting. And then here I was like running around the woods and putting camouflage on and shooting a rifle and all that stuff. I was like, oh, that's probably what I want to do instead. So yeah, I grew up wanting to be a lawyer and then an architect, and then I ended up in the army. Oh, well, let's start with a struggle. I think I continually struggle with pride and trying, my attempts at being humble. Over time, I've realized I guess the childhood I grew up in and making it away from all of that. You had to be in my neighborhood for sure. You had to be cocky. Um, there was no such thing in my neighborhood being around uh, thieves, drug dealers, and all the rest of that. There was no such thing as being humble. There was no, you were seen as meek. So that environment, I think, forged me in a way that I had to be braggadocious and one of those folks that talk shit and all that stuff. And I think as I kind of rose in the high school and got to West Point and everything, it does that. Places like that don't help sometimes. I think so. Over the course of my couple years being on the earth, I've always struggled with pulling that back. And the way the army kind of works, it also, I've been lucky enough to be successful and have people involved in my life. So, I've had more wins, and that like would allow me to creep back into a space of being braggadocious and kind of wanting to be number one and all. I'm also competitive. Over time, as I've gained accomplishments, I've always had to check that thing inside of me that's been there since I was young and little. So that's something I constantly struggle with. I think as a weakness, as a major weakness. Strength. Um, um, I think people external to me would tell me that I have a decent bandwidth. Um, Let me explain what it means. They see like I have a family and we're solid and strong and beautiful and we're very involved in the community and the places where we are. And then I get to run this nonprofit, right? And then on top of that, I'm a battalion commander. And then, all the other things I get a chance to do. People would think like, well, how in the world do you do all those things, right? You must have great bandwidth, ability to be in a lot of different places, seemingly all at the same time. So I think people outside of me would say I got great bandwidth, but I think that comes back from that neighborhood, right? There was a time when I helped my cousins move drugs, but also got good grades at school, played sports, rode my bike sometimes 2 hours across town to my football practice, then rode to Pizza Hut and worked all day and then rode back home, might ride by my girlfriend's house, now my wife. I got a chance over time to like do a lot of those things very early on. And then you go to West Point. West Point is nothing but a pressure cooker about time management. Like it layer you with all these things. So I think over time, I've been able to, I guess, grow a bandwidth, and that's what people would most likely say. Maybe one of my stronger strengths is.
When did you realize that you were going to be a successful person? When you saw these small techniques, like if I ride to football practice and then I show up at Pizza Hut, that and I go by and see my girlfriend. When did you start saying, "Oh, these patterns of success are good things to replicate over time. Show up on
Mm,
time with the right
yeah.
attitude." What was it? When did it click for you? Like, okay, I can do this.
Mm. That is a fantastic question. No one's ever asked me that. Maybe two things. One, Mama J, the lady I grew up with. I think when she started kind of pushing me in her own way to say like you can do this and she would do whatever she needed to do to get me to those, to sign, to get me to get my physical so I could play football and all these other things. And, maybe take me to, a interview for a Pizza Hut job or something. That when she believed in me enough to, stop whatever she was doing to get me to do that. And then told me like, hey, you are going to go to college. She was not a college graduate. You will go to college. You will do it for free because your grades are good enough and you just need to work hard and do it. When she start like pressing me, but then like supporting me by giving me the opportunity, I think that's when I started to feel successful. And then obviously, I got into a great college, and I think that kind of like really fortified it for me. So I would say that's one thing for sure. Mama J just, saying I could, and then put me in positions where I literally could, right? It's one thing for a parent to say, hey, go run the world. You're going to be president one day. It's another for a parent to sacrifice everything possible in their lives to make that happen. She worked 2 jobs. She put microchips on a computer board all day long, still does. She's retiring this year. During the day, just microchips on boards, very tedious, right? Soldering. Come home, cook us some top ramen, circle back out and go be a janitor in a hospital all night. Clean up people's nastiness and the blood and all the other stuff you see in a hospital. Come home, tuck us in the bed, rinse, recycle, repeat. When she like would sacrifice on like, I'm a swing through and not go to, I'm gonna come off work for a second and then take you to this thing and then come back. When she was doing all that, I think that's what really pushes. So that's the one thing. And then I think the second thing is being in high school, being a JROTC, seeing that I could potentially be a leader of others, that people would listen, and they weren't just listening because I was telling them to do it. I didn't even have a knife hand back then, right? I think it was that. I think it was Tom Grimes and Sergeant Major Sanderson, like Vietnam vets, like people at least back then I thought were like, I could idolize in a way, telling me, hey, we're going to make sure you go to West Point. I was like, huh? So it was like that too. And having those kind of wins, like leading little groups of people and being on the drill team in the color guard and all that kind of little stuff. I think that was a second piece there that told me I might be successful one day.
Tell me about sports and football, and what position you played in the championship game, and you won the game by catching the ball and sprinting, and you hurdled the guy and then into the end zone for a touchdown. And
I don't have any of those stories from football.
Oh, man.
Like football for me was the funnest thing I did in high school, and I was with all my friends, and I remember going to all the summer camp, summer training stuff, and being on the bus when it's hot and sweaty and riding for an hour across the state to play somebody and practice, and riding my bike across town, putting on pads, being super tired, and like rinse, recycle, repeat, doing it the other way. Football was a grind for me. I only like started half my senior year because I was small, tiny. I was a cornerback. And the only reason I was a defensive back is because I could run fast on a track. So somebody taught me to run fast backwards, right? And I had a tackle or two that was really good. I had an interception or two that was okay. A couple of defensive plays, but nothing super sexy on the football field. I did go to the state meet for the 800 though in track. Track was the thing I was good at. Track was, and you remember me, I'm still not a big guy. I was like in high school, I had to be 5'10". Gosh, I had to be about 105 or so. I was so tiny, 5'10", maybe 110, 114. And I don't know if you know anything about the 800, but those 2 long laps, that's usually like an arena for like 6-footers. They got super long legs, long strides. So when I showed up to when I got out of the regular season, I walk up to a line for us to do a stagger start or whatever. And there'd be all these people towering over me. Like, how in the world did you make it to regionals? I was like, I'm about to show you. So I had a quick pace, but by the time I got to state, I could never win state because it'd be these 7 foot gargantuans just like galloping. I'd be chasing them down. But I do have one maybe interesting story from a state meet. The last state meet I went to my high school senior year. My mom had kicked me out of the house. I was living in my car. I was living with friends. I lived with Ashley's house for a little bit back when we were dating in high school, and I ended up living with her aunt for a while. And my mom and I were not on good terms at that time, but true to her word, I looked up at the stands when I got on the block. I got out to run my race, and my mom was up in those stands. And we were not on talking terms. We're not in good standing with each other. But my mom showed up today because she would do that. She was always there, and she wasn't like the rah holding up signs. She had a presence about her that I could always find her in the stands. I just scanned real quick, and she was there. And I did not do well. I got like fourth or something, but she was there, and we kind of hugged and everything. And then she went back home, and I drove back across the street to Ashley's aunt's house. But that's maybe a unique story. It's kind of bittersweet in a way.
So that's crazy with your mom, right? How in the world do you find yourself like kicked out of the house? I mean, you got to tell me. Come on, what the heck?
So back to that overconfidence thing. I had gotten into West Point. It's the springtime of my senior year. I've got all the grades. I got into a good school. I'm like, hey, I want to party because I'm about to go to prison. Like West Point it's like going to Arkham, right? It's a prison. And I was, staying out too late and everything. And she's, threw this curfew on me. I was like, I've never had a curfew. What's this? And so I started busting curfew a bunch of times. And, one time I came home, it had to be super late, like 2 or 3 in the morning, which might not be crazy for some people, but for my mama in the South, man, that was insane. And she was like, you come here one more time and your key won't work. And I was like, whatever. So I stayed out late, and I stayed out so late that I was like, you know what? I'm not going to come home like 1 in the morning. I'm just going to stay at my friend's house. I'm going to come back tomorrow morning. So I rolled back to the house at like 10 o'clock the next day when my brother was with me too. I was like, it's the two of us together, my younger brother. I'll be okay. Well, when I went to the door, my key didn't work. And she came to the door and she let my brother in. She said, Sean can come in, you can't. So Sean goes in there and he's talking. I hear him talking. My brother came back and she was like, hey dog, she's not letting you in here. You're not coming in the house. She told me to pack your bag. Here it is. And that was that. My mom did not bend. I got in my car and I drove away. That first night I slept in my car for sure. But she was not playing. And this was before the ages, social media and cell phones and all that other stuff. So I had to get like on a payphone to, call my mom, like, are you serious? Like, is this really? She's like, you are not listening to my rules. You were coming on, you took your brother out and you all stayed out overnight and you didn't ask my permission. You figure it out. You want to be a man, you go out there and figure it out. It was one of the best lessons I've ever got.
Right.
It was one of the best. I didn't live in my house for 2 months, 2 or 3 months. Through my graduation and everything, my mom did not let me come back home. I went to my graduation in a separate car. We met there, had a good time. We all parted ways. I moved back and she let me move back in the house 2 weeks before I went to West Point, just because she was like, hey, you're about to go off to college. You should come home and we should like work on some stuff before you go. That's the best thing my mama ever did for me, was hold me accountable. She held me accountable. I was not following the rules and I was, too big for my britches and all that stuff they say. The best thing is one of the best decisions actually she made in my life in total, because it gave me a pump your brakes before you go off to college, 18-year-old. And now looking back on that story and looking on our relationship, I understood what she was trying to do. My mom was being a leader, and leaders do that. They hold you accountable. Sometimes it's got to be real tough. She punched me in the chest and was like, you're out. You want to be a man? Go figure it out. You want to sleep, eat, figure all that out. And I didn't know what I was doing. Taught me a good lesson.
Amen. Amen. Do you remember having a rebellious soldier that you had to look at in the eye and kick out?
Oh man. I've had a number of interesting soldiers. I'm actually creeping up on 20 years of service next summer. So um in that 20 years, I've seen a lot of me in soldiers, a lot of that young me. And I don't I, when I was a platoon leader, I have a good one. When I was a platoon leader, I had, and I'm not going to name him, I had a gentleman, Wayne Martinez. I know you know him. Wayne Martinez was my platoon sergeant. And Wayne Martinez came up to me in the motor pool there on Fort Bragg one day. And he was like, "Hey, sir, I got one for you." I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "Private so and so wants to talk to you. Open door policy." And he starts snickering a little bit. And I'm like, "You snickering about Wayne?" And he's like, "Yeah, he says he wants to talk to you." I was like, "Okay." And he knew what it was about. That's why he's laughing. This kid walks up to me, stands at attention, and says, "Sir, I don't like you." Full stop. And I was like, "What?" And Sergeant Martinez was like, he was like trying to look stern, but he was trying to hold it back. And this kid was like, "Sir, I don't like the way you lead. I don't like the way you look. I don't like the way you carry yourself. I don't like the way you talk. I don't like West Pointers." Like he just started letting me have it. And Wayne is over here now. He's just laughing because he's like, "Where is this going?" And the kid, he ended all of that with, "Yeah, I don't like how we do PT or anything in this platoon, and I want to transfer platoons. And I'm coming to get your permission to do so. If you don't honor my wishes, I'm going to use it, the battery commander's open door policy." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna turn you back over to the platoon sergeant, and we'll continue to have that conversation." Obviously, the kid didn't leave the platoon. Like he was where he needed to be. Um, we were a little hard on him for sure, as everyone is, and he was a rebel for a lot in a lot of ways. He just didn't like how how we were conducting business. Wayne just wanted to see my reaction. He wanted to see how I was going to react to that because he was like, "This kid ain't moving. Like this kid didn't do anything but like secure himself in the platoon by doing what he just did." So yeah, I think that was me in high school for sure. That was a young, like 15, 16, 17-year-old me. And luckily, I had good people like Wayne around me that he knew how to kind of keep me humble as a lieutenant and let me hear stuff like that he could have screened me from. But we stories like that are what we really built our relationship off of. He was, man, he was the best thing. I compare every NCO I've had thus far to Wayne Martinez all day.
Oh my gosh. Marty Marr was a good buddy of mine. His nickname is Net Boy. He was my fishing partner at JRTC. He couldn't catch any fish, but he was good with the net. So I let him hold the net when I caught the fish. But old Marty Marr stayed with me for a while at Fort Hood. He's got him a big old motorcycle now. He lives outside
Yeah,
of Fort Bragg, and he's doing
yeah.
great, right?
We actually lived in the same neighborhood when I was much older. When I was a major, he was in my neighborhood, and I would swing by his house. I'd be running the neighborhood. I see him. He came by the house a couple times. I had some LTs come over for like beer and pizza to just like kind of talk, do this military mentor stuff. And I brought Wayne, and I was like, "Hey, y'all, I mean, y'all want to hear stories from me at, my 13th, 14th, 15th year of service. What you actually need to hear about is LT cooking, how I used to mess stuff up and learn from a great NCO like this." And by that time, obviously Marty was retired. But he still, I mean, he just is always at, he was just like when I was at West Point and when I heard about 82nd NCOs, like that was the pick. He was like a poster child for it, but not like too rigid. He was funny. He could rib you a little bit. You know, he was so good. Like Marty was the greatest. He was a good dude.
Oh, for sure. So you got to tell me about a lost lieutenant story, or a story where you're like, you realize that, oh my gosh, I'm about to get my butt chewed. Or, was there a time where you end up, wandering around in the middle of the night with your whole platoon following you or anything like that?
I got so many, and a lot of them involve Marty. So I'm gonna give you a couple. One, Marty wouldn't let me like lead PT or run in the front of the formation. He was like, "No, LT, you're too skinny and fast, and you're not gonna kill us all." And on occasion, he would, and when he would, he'd be like, "Run as fast as you can, kill everybody." But outside of that, he would always make me in straggler control, always. And I was like, "Why am I back? This is killing my knees. Why am I all the way in the back?" But he taught me a good lesson. One, that's when we would do our like practice all the jump master stuff, all the stuff I had to memorize. And he'd like make me say it while I was running to make sure I had it memorized. One. Two, he asked me one time, we're in the back, he's like, "Hey, what can you see?" And I was like kind of running down where Sergeant Paul's always like looking out for people. Scott Paul, by the way. He's always looking out for people, and he's always running beside somebody and trying to take care of somebody. Alex Blaine, now a chief warrant officer, would always be way out front talking shit to everybody, but maybe not like circling back to help somebody come along. And we just kind of went. Sergeant Rodello was one of the, like, we just go down the line of all the things I could see. And he was like, "Now think about this, LT. If your West Point ass was all the way up in front, well, how would you be able to see all that?" And I was like, "Man, this is a priceless lesson." Second LT story for about Marty taught me something that was also kind of a kick in the pants. When I go to jump master school, here's my study guide right here. I'm roster number 11, right there at the top. This is my study guide from way back then. He was like, "Hey, I was, you're ready to go. We did all those runs. You got it. But I want you to remember, I was a first time go. So if you ain't a first time go, you're a no-go in my book. Like, I don't care how many times you go." I was like, okay. So he put a lot of pressure on me. And he called me every day, like, "You fail yet? You fail yet?" Like, he was always getting on me. I was re-entry qualified. I get to my third, and I mess it up. And the fourth and the fifth try were on graduation day. So he called me on the third day, on the third try. He was like, "You fail yet?" And I was like, "Yeah, I actually did again." He's like, "Wait a minute. Are you serious?" I was like, "I was messing with you all the time. Like, did you not pass GMPI yet?" And I'm like, "No, Marty, like, I got to pass tomorrow morning." He's like, "Look, Captain Hobart and First Sergeant Cowan, they have your t-shirt. They got your jump master band. Like, they're coming to graduation tomorrow. You better pass." I passed on my fourth try the very next morning. But man, that's probably the most nervous and lost I've ever been. And I thought he was like just, talking shit. But that night when he talked me through, like, "Hey, I know I've been messing with you. You got to pass tomorrow. We've already bought all the stuff. You're already a jump master in our minds. So prove it to us, LT." And luckily I did. The one major mistake I made as a lieutenant, though, we went to Fort Knox. I was a second lieutenant. This is before I got Marty. I went with Edward Goldman as my as my guy, which I could tell stories about him all day. We went out to Fort Knox for the summer. That's back when West Point used to send cadets to something called mounted maneuver training at Fort Knox. They come down for a portion of the summer, and we were running an Avenger site. We were cycling, thousands and thousands of rounds through the Avenger, training all these kids. We had on our maroon berets and our DCUs. We were the only airborne unit there. It was really good. And I was the only lieutenant running the site. All the sites were run by captains, but my leadership was confident enough to send me with Eddie Goldman and the rest of our little crew. And we did really good that summer. But my battalion commander, Wild Bill, told us to make sure you don't drink while you're there. And we were like, okay, we won't drink the whole summer, Fort Knox. And we didn't. until we were done with the exercise. And we had done, I mean, we had shot, I think, something crazy like 15,000 rounds over the summer, no safety incidents, and we had been awarded the best site. That the award I got, or my platoon got, is in my office right now, in my battalion commander office. So they wanted to let loose, right? And I was like, okay, y'all can go downtown and have a drink or two. I'm not going. Big mistake on my part. I was like, la la la, I'm gonna stay here in the barracks. They all went out. They got super drunk, came back. We had an issue, an altercation in the barracks. They woke me up like 2:00 in the morning, and it was another battery commander waking me up. I've already called your battery commander. I'm pretty sure our battalion commanders are speaking. I need to talk to you right now, LT. And the response was to get everybody up and take everybody outside and smoke them to get all the alcohol out of the system at like 2 or 3 in the morning. If I did that today, I would be, getting a lot of trouble. But back then, that's what we did. And during that kind of back and forth, I had a kid in the platoon what didn't want to do the exercise. I was like, hey, just do the exercises, just execute. Y'all went out and drinking. We're going to get rid of it now. Like, you're going to get it out your system so y'all can sober up so y'all don't do anything else in the barracks. And he turned to me, he said, hey, fuck you, LT, straight up like that. And it was just a moment, and we all kind of calmed down at USAD. But when we got back to Bragg, the kid who caused a certain altercation that brought us out there, he got an ARC 15. That kid who said FULT, he got ARC 15. And I almost lost the platoon. If the company commander Rich Hobart and First Sergeant Cowan hadn't gone to bat for me, I'd have lost the platoon. Wild Bill, that's Bill Stacy, by the way. He wanted to let me go, but they played my back my play rather, and I got out of there by the skin of my teeth, and it worked out from there. But that's the big mistake I made. I should have not let him drink, but if anything, I should have went with him. That's just absentee leadership doesn't work like that. So yeah,
it's putting a throttle on steely-eyed paratroopers for a long, long time, and then telling them, just pop the cot just a little bit, just have a couple sips, right? That just doesn't work very well, right? It's just like, ooh, they blow up, right? Who's the designated driver? Well, I thought you were. Oh, crap.
Oh yeah, I learned that night. I was still a second lieutenant, which is not an excuse.
Hey, but Goldman's the platoon sergeant. So looking back on it, it's like, no crap. Goldman takes his platoon down and gets in trouble. Huh? Like, Goldman. And I love Goldman. Dude, I can't wait till I do my interview with Goldman. He is amazing. And his brand new wife just opened a yoga studio, and they're doing great. And so I'm excited about them. And tell me about like how you build networks. Tell me about like what goes into your mind as you're thinking about, you have a militarymentors.org platform. You have been building relationships from the time I remember you from OBC days, and you were known for that, right? Tell me about how that works in your head.
Quite simply, I just network for network's sake. Somebody told me that a long time ago, that if you network with an intent in mind, it'll just kind of fizzle out. If you are like, well, if I connect with this person, we can use them for XYZ down the line or something like that, it just never works. So in my case, I've just always, I think I gotta say, I think I have a purpose statement. I think I'm purpose built to serve others. So I am always trying to serve others. And in that vein, I end up building rapport and just kind of connecting and staying connected over time. And sometimes, it comes to something else. Sometimes it does not. but I think I just start from the default of networking for networking's sake and trying to be a good person. There are times, of course, like with our board from Military Mentors, there were specific asks and I was looking for specific people, right? That's a different type of networking. And I think in that kind of vein, I might be bold and not scared because people are humans. I mean, they just, sometimes they're just waiting on an ask. But in most cases, like the way my mind works is, someone brings me something, or brings me to the attention of somebody, or makes this kind of, I think it would be good for you if you knew that person. I always follow up. I always connect. There are tons of people that I'm blessed to know, and there are tons of people who have cold called me, cold shot me a note on social media. Hey, Chevy, you're in this space. I don't know you, but I know some of your friends. And could you help me with this? And I would on a whim. And then 5 years later, that person is actually like inviting me on a podcast or something. Um, so I just, if there was some advice in that, it's network for network's sake. Realize that, humanity can't live without connection. And if you're trying to serve others, eventually the universe will take care of you. The universe just continues to take care of me over and over and over again.
Tell me about, so I believe that the universe taking care of us is a spiritual thing. I think that somehow deep inside, there's a regenerative effect of our world if we'll tap into it. Take a
Yeah.
minute, if you don't mind, and tell me a little bit about your spirituality and what keeps regenerating in your life and what keeps you going on those long road marches, or humping off the drop zone in the middle of the night, wondering if that's the real Steinerade or if that's somebody with a flashlight messing around, right?
That's interesting. Growing up Southern Baptist for sure, I think I had a good idea of what kind of religion was, but not my individual spirituality, because I think there's a difference. And I gotta say, on my first deployment overseas with guys like Marty and all the rest of the troops that I went with, I was really questioning things. How could my first time I deployed, I went to Iraq, and Iraq for me, it was like there was a lot of destruction and death and chaos and all kinds of stuff, and I was really thinking like, well, how could there be like this benevolent higher power and then like this stuff is happening? And I actually had I had a lot of close friends and classmates die on that first deployment. My West Point class actually we have the dubious distinction of having the most deaths of any class since Vietnam. So that's not a great distinction to have, but we had a lot, a lot going on. So I started questioning my spirituality and trying to find it. So I did a lot of reading. Buddhism, Hinduism, Catholicism, every ism you can think of, right? Just trying to find out I grew up Southern Baptist Christian. What does that mean? And I think along the way of that search, I found little bits and pieces of a lot of different things. But the one kind of constant was that there's got to be something out there and it's pulling on me. It's pulling me in this direction and I need to listen to it. And that's what I base a lot of my spirituality on today. I was lucky enough to read the entire Bible, line by line. And it was a great thing for me to, I'm a reader. I like it's a bookshelf back there. And when, reading it line for line, and I have a Quran upstairs as well. And I have a lot of kind of Buddhist stuff back here as well. I have a Zen manual, Clarice Bryan, Expect Nothing, that changed my life. I've read so much of this stuff, but all of it says one thing to me. It's like the universe is calling, listen. So that's how I would, I categorize myself today as a Christian. That's how I'd identify. And I got Philippians 4:13 is tattooed on my arm and stuff like that. I really do believe in phrases like that. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, for those that don't know. but it's all about this kind of universe pulling on me. And I think as I've listened to that, kind of that spiritual core of myself, which is, goes with all these other pieces of your fitness, your mental fitness, your emotional fitness, all that other stuff. I think I've been healthy, if you could call it that. The things that have happened, instead of it being like when I was younger and a kid, like thinking I could just be successful and being this overconfident, jerk off. I stopped doing that, stopped competing with everybody, and start pulling back and listening to some universal thing pull me in a direction and going with that. I think that's where my true like connection to humans, like network and all the rest of stuff, actually came from me just listening to a universal thing.
Amen. I love it. Take a minute, if you don't mind, and brag on your family. You talk about your mom, you talk about Ashley. I know that you have at least one daughter. Tell me about, you have pets. Even tell me about, where your father was, or what, tell
Yeah.
me about all that.
Yeah, so I'll start. If I were to introduce myself, I'd say I'm a father, and I'd say I'm a father first, a husband next, and then I eventually get to being an Army officer, because I actually learned the most from trying to lead a home, trying to lead a family. So I learned right here in this house. I really didn't understand leading by example until I would, walk in the kitchen with my kid, couldn't say any words, and I say I love you, and I slap Ashley on the butt, and then the little kid was like running behind me, slapping mom on the butt too, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't want you to do that in public, so we're not, gotta watch my actions. But I have two daughters. I have London, who's 13. She's born on Fort Bragg on the 4th of July, right before the fireworks hit, right outside of the hospital, and I have a surprise baby. She's almost 4. She'll be 4 here around Thanksgiving. She's born Thanksgiving in Boston a couple years ago when I was in school. So, about a decade apart, both on national holidays, not too hard to remember, too easy to remember. So, very, very much blessings to both of them. London is everything I wish I was as a 13-year-old. Kind, she's gracious, she's extremely smart. Um, we should actually change her middle name to Humble because the humility she has. She's just a super good person. Um, and everybody knows her as everybody else would describe her that way. I know I'm a father. Everyone describes London as that. Her sister is like a little miniature version of that, with the asterisk or the exception of she's autistic. So she is very brilliant, very kind, full of smiles, too much energy. I definitely shouldn't have been changing diapers in my 40s. But she has some challenges connecting with folks, and sometimes that's emotionally. And but she's such a graceful blessing for us, because it really like you really figure out your leadership or your fatherhood when your kids are having these kind of built-in life stumbles as opposed to kind of these externalities. But the interesting thing about her is she doesn't know she's autistic, right? This is just how she interprets life in the world. So we don't treat her like she's handicapped or anything like that. She just knows like this is how I interact. Um, True blessing for sure. And her name is Lola. And London named it Lola. She was old enough. We gave her a chance. She always wanted a sibling. We just didn't, have another kid for a long time. So when it came around, she came up with the name Lola. So that's how she got it. And obviously now I've been with Ashley for 24 years this past weekend. Been married for 16. And Ashley has done a number of jobs over time. One of the long ones she did was she was a personal trainer. That's how I still look like I'm a lieutenant, because she, always took care of me. But right now she is an executive assistant. She works for the University of Pennsylvania, so she does everything virtually. She works for 2 Wharton Business School professors, and they're very busy and very famous. So she thought I was busy, doing all this military mentor stuff and all that, until she started working for those Wharton professors. And all of a sudden she was like, "Oh, you don't really got much going on." So that's them. That's my in-home family. We go by Team Cook. Back before they were saying like teams this or whatever. We've been saying that for years, and we have like our own family values and everything. And she's really been a rock for us. All my things that I've done over time have really been the advice of Ashley. All the things, the assignments we've had, to include this battalion command, were all selected by my wife. So, well, note for you youngins out there, if there's anybody young out there listening, like, just listen to your wife. Happy wife, happy life.
Tell me about taking like command, right? Did you do a company command? Did you a battery command? Were you an air defense still? Tell me about that time in your life.
So I swapped out of air defense in 07. Basically after that first deployment, Wayne and I, Marty, we both went and took the D-Lab, Defense Language Aptitude Battery, on deployment to both changed into things. And, he went on and he was like an interrogator and stuff like that. And I took it because I wanted to come in the special operations career field. So we both did all okay. We both swap roles. So I came in as a brand new captain to, the qualification course and all that stuff in SWIC, wearing my little Ranger panties and, pissing people off when I run up and down our dens. And I swapped over then. So as a team, as a young captain, you're a team leader. And that's the equivalent of being a company commander. It's just super tiny. And I always thought like I was good at kind of that small level leadership. So having a team again, it's kind of like having a platoon again or something. So I didn't command a company until I was a major. And that was, 10, 11, 12 years in the Army, and I was a company commander. So I commanded a company in PSYOP, and it was a unique company where I had PSYOPers, and I had civilians. I had 25 series, signal type soldiers that were graphic illustrators and combat cameramen and all kinds of unique things in a very large formation that actually had the largest property book in PSYOP. So I learned a lot with them for 2 years commanding that company. And then now I'm in battalion command. So my next time commanding was up here. Obviously, I had a bunch of staff jobs, and I went and taught at West Point and stuff in between there. I went to school a couple of times as well. But now I'm in charge of the headquarters command battalion here at Fort Meade. It is not a PSYOP battalion. It is a garrison base. I'm like a mini mayor. So I work directly for the garrison commander. I have MPs. I have, the religious support office with the chaplains. I have the JAGs. I have a whole swath of people in between. And it's a unique opportunity here at the Cyber Center of Excellence, work with the NSA, to just lead a different formation, get a different experience, be in the national capital region, and be at a small post that I've never been on, and be around some good soldiers and good civilians, and have a different experience before I crest this hill and kind of my career tapers off here.
What is it like to think about being a mentor of somebody? Tell me about this military mentor thing. Tell me about, you've got this vision of helping people, right? You, at every turn, you've told me, what am I doing to help? I've got a team Cook. I'm gathering things. Tell me about the military mentors and what your guys' direction is and what your aim is.
So it actually started with a mentee. This wasn't, I wasn't sitting around as a captain like, I don't have nothing to do in the Army. I don't have enough, going on in my life. It was a totally different story. I was, I had stayed connected to this guy. Him and I, Jim Perkins is his name, had met when I was as a cadre, as a upperclassman at West Point. And this story basically is, I was teaching drill for the summer, left face, right face, about face, salute. he saluted wrong, hand wonky. I had to change him and made note that he was in my squad. And then, over the summer, connected with these different individuals in my squad. And, when you go to the academic year at West Point, for those that don't know, you're not in the same company. So he was going to go to somebody else's leadership. And I just simply said to Jim and the rest of the squad, hey, if you ever need anything, let me know. I can be an outside resource outside of your chain of command. Didn't know that was mentorship. Just thought I was just trying to be a good leader. And just fast forward, he kept asking those kind of questions, right? Like, what's it like? Why'd you pick the major that you picked? He was always asking questions. When I graduated before him, he's like, what is it like to be a platoon leader? When I deployed before him, what's it like to be, overseas? When I got married before him, what is it? It kept rolling. Fast forward like a decade, and he's still asking these questions. And he's in grad school. He's going to transition to get out. I am I'm leaving West Point and going to ILE, our kind of major level education. And so we're both in the education space, kind of rethinking our next paths, because being a field grade officer, it can be very different than being a lieutenant and a captain. And he's going to transition completely out, right? And he was like, hey, Chevy, why don't you exist in my formation? Like, he was an engineer officer who had served at JBLM. Like, I completely different past. Oh, by the way, he's a white Catholic guy who grew up in Connecticut. So everything we talked about tonight says that I'm not that, right? But we had always been connected. And he just was wondering, like, why couldn't he have, this relationship with his battalion commander, his company commander along the way? And he had a radical way of trying to address it. He was like, well, I want to start a nonprofit to like address it at scale. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, I want to make a nonprofit and like attack this thing from a outside angle. So I don't have to be in a uniform, and we could not have rank and all that. We can just go in and consult military formations and all kind of stuff. And so originally he was asking me to just kind of consult him. Like I had taught freshman psychology. I had a couple of degrees in it. And I'm giving advice on how to insert the science of this mentorship stuff. And after a while, he was like, Chevy, why am I asking you advice? Like, why don't you just start this thing and work on it with me? And that's how it started. Mm-hmm. Here we are 7 years later. He's now the president of our board of advisors, and I get to be the executive director of it. And it's changed and morphed over time to do what we do today. But it really started with just that thing that I'm talking about, that networking kind of thing, that connecting with other people thing, you listen to the universe. The universe was asking me to, talk to Jim and listen to him on these phone calls about this thing he was trying to start. And then the universe said, hey, he's going to ask you to like be a part of it. And I could have absolutely said no. I was like, no, this feels like the right thing. And here I am I'm wearing the swag and got the picture in the back and all of that. Because it's been another way to impact. And if I can close the button on it with this is, people do ask, like, how do you do that and be a battalion commander and all that stuff? Well, the bottom line is the military mentors thing puts me in spaces I couldn't be in as just Lieutenant Colonel Cook. People call on me because I'm in another vein, Dr. Cook, or in another vein because I'm executive director of this thing. And I look at the science of mentoring and not just tell war stories. And there's nothing wrong with war stories, for sure. But this kind of other developmental spectrum with the science behind mentoring is why people pull me in. Tomorrow I'm talking to the Army Corps of Engineers here in the Baltimore district to start their mentoring program. They are not interested in me being a lieutenant colonel in Fort Meade. They're interested in me being, hey, you've been doing this military mentors thing for a while. You can actually kick this program off and tell us the do's and the don'ts and the difference between teaching and coaching and mentoring. So it's been a way to, again, purpose-built to serve others, a really focused, structured way to help others.
Do you remember a time or a day or a moment? Like sometimes I ask this question, like, what was your longest day? Do you remember going, oh my gosh,
There's not one for military mentors, really. There is one there's many in my life, and usually a lot of them are when I was younger and life was just in shambles. But if I can think of one military related, it was when on that first deployment when Michael Crutchfield shot himself. We didn't have a death for 9 months in Cold Steel. And that morning we gave one of our young specialists an Article 15 for just patterns of misconduct, things like that. And that kid went back to his office in the motor pool on that deployment, barricaded himself in the room. He put on his IBA without any plates in it. He pulled his 9mm out. He loaded it. He put it to his chest and he shot himself. Didn't die immediately. Our medics, one of them being his roommate, worked on him, like kept him at like a kind of even keel, and we got him to the cache, and he died there. And I remember all the phone calls, the radios, chirping, and at the time, Bill Herrera was my company commander. Han D. Wolf was my first sergeant, and I was the battery XO. I remember all of us rushing down to the hospital and the cache rather, and he just didn't make it. And they, back then and what was going on at the time, the doc came out with all the stuff all over him, didn't even clean himself up. He's like, hey, he's gone. Y'all want to go in there and see him? And I was the first person walking the room, and I could see him just like I can see you on the screen right now. Just as he was gone. Gray, fluids leaking out, all of that. Super long day for all of us. Tore our battery up because there were certain people in there that was like, didn't believe in you taking your own life, and you can't do that, especially in combat. Then you had a lot of other people that was like, this kid had troubles, we tried to take care of him, and it was our failure. Definitely that one of the longest days of my military life, for sure. And I still deal with young Crutchfield and how that all kind of planned out, how it all happened. And I know there's guys that are in 3-4 that might be listening to this and remembers that, and they're, even me probably saying his name out loud for some folks is going to piss some people off. Some people are still not happy with the decision that happened at that time. But if you're one of those folks that are out there and ever want to talk about Michael Crutchfield, hit me up. We can definitely talk about it and work through it.
It's tough to lose soldiers. It's tough to lose teammates, especially when you're involved in tough discipline, right? You guys in your mind, you're using a tool to try to keep somebody in line. And what you get in some cases is the ultimate defiance, right? You're not going to chain me in. I'm going to do what I want to do anyway. Yeah. And it's really, really tough when you're deployed, and it's a pressure cooker, right? Being deployed, and it's just like rah, rah, rah. And those were times when we didn't have as much of a mission as you might think we would have. And that causes external stresses even more, right? If everybody's got their own mission and we're all out there looking at the skies, then no big deal. But when you're just doing something different, what were the craziest things you had to do as an air defense lieutenant? Do you remember having to, right? I mean, come on.
Oh man, I immediately thought about prop blast. That I probably, I have my division Pam here for anybody that used to have these things stuck in your pocket. As a lieutenant cook right here, had this in my pocket with my BDUs. I remember doing prop blasts, and I probably can't say some of the stuff on a live on this to be recorded. But I remember at prop blasts, there was a lot of crazy stuff at prop blasts. There's two things I'll tell. One major general, he's a 1-star that was overseeing it. When I had all the lights in my face and I'm getting sprayed with all the stuff and I'm answering the questions, it's like, hey, what tattoo does Brigadier General so-and-so have? I'm just trying to be crazy. I'm like, he has a 80-second symbol with the master wings behind it. It's tattooed on his butt. And he gets up and he says, right tattoo, wrong location. He comes in front of me in the lights. He pulls his shirt down. He has it literally tattooed on his chest. Master Wings with 82nd right there on his chest. And I was like, that's crazy. So I got some props for right tattoo, wrong location. Just trying to be funny. But another thing I did in Prop Blast was, the barracks don't exist anymore where we were, obviously. But if everybody remembers kind of how they were all connected, you could basically you could cut through a hallway and you could be in the different batteries. And then there was the defect was kind of in the going out, like jutting out into the parking lot in a way. They had me like in my platoon little room, and I was like getting smoked and stuff. I'm sweating and I'm like taking my top off and everything. And it's like, well, you just gonna go there, you just gonna get naked, huh? And I was like, and I stripped butt ass naked. I'm not making this up, as lieutenant. And I grabbed my helmet and I, put it down to cover myself. And I sprint, and they're trying to catch me. Like, what are you doing, LT? I'm like running through, and I run into that defect area, and they line us all up, to continue with the Prop Blast stuff. And battalion commander comes in, sergeant major comes in, like, what is this lieutenant here doing naked? So that's probably the absolute craziest thing I did as lieutenant. It was all dudes, except for our chemo. And they were like, get the chemo, make sure she doesn't come in here. So that was the craziest thing I did as a lieutenant. I don't think I'd get in too much trouble for telling that story. And I'm pretty sure some of the people who were in Prop Blast with me and remember that moment thought it was probably pretty funny.
Tell me about, being a jump master. Did you do jump master duties a lot? Did you enjoy doing that? I know I did.
I tell you what, I don't have a lot of crazy awards or anything like that. And there's never been things that I really sought out. But I will say, growing up in the division, being around the type of leaders that I had, Tommy King, Bill Stacy, Sergeant Major Stout, and I could go on with so many different names, but all these folks are macerated. So I was like, I want master wings. And the process to go, you got to go to jump master school. That's why I had my stuff here. Like, it was a big deal for me to go as a lieutenant, and go in that winter class before we deployed. And I was senior rated before I left the battalion, and Marty and I were the heirs for the battalion before I left and became PSYOP. And they let me do a PJ before I left. So I had all my stuff. I was senior rated and all that stuff, but they actually let me be a PJ, which brand new captains being a PJ back then, absolutely not. But it was like the gift the battalion gave me to leave while I was leaving. So it was a really big deal for me to be a jump master. And then, one of the reasons I wanted to stay in the soft community is because I wanted to keep jumping. It was always kind of a cool thing for me. It still is. I don't jump now, obviously, but as a young captain, having all that experience in 82nd Land, transferring over to PSYOP, I had been a jump master a long time. I actually, on that side, on the PSYOP side, I actually became a jump master instructor, a black hat for a bit. So I was, training other people to be jump masters, and transition between the different parachutes and all kinds of stuff. I was on all kinds of great aircraft over time. And I was master rated as a captain. And me and my battalion commander were actually, trying to beat each other to be master rated because, she wanted to be able to hit me in the chest and not the other way around. But I beat her by like 2 jumps. And people thought it was a big deal, being a young team leader in PSYOP with master wings. And everybody just, it was, if you asked me to do a duty, I was on it. And that just kind of wasn't the culture in PSYOP back then. It was really NCO heavy. And there's nothing wrong with it. It just, officers they weren't coming from the 82nd. They weren't coming from an airborne unit. So they had to all catch up. Where I came from the 82nd, I was already, I had like 50 jumps by the time I came on PSYOP. So it was a big deal. And for me, being a leader in the sky, right? Knowing everything about the aircraft, instilling confidence in people who, I mean, I've seen them at every rank be scared, be pukey, all of that other stuff. You know, I don't want to put anybody's business out there, but there's some general officers I know right now that I seen puking aircraft, and they're air defenders, and they're still on active duty. So I'm not gonna put them out there. But just to be able to be able to handle all of that, and then I've been on a couple different types of style of aircraft and platforms and different types of parachutes, and just to know all those intricacies has been one of probably the best things I've done in the military. That's when you know how to. I think that's when you can really be a leader in those kind of situations where it's. When I transitioned over to the side realm, a lot of it was, they would do duties a kind of different way where you're leading to stick out. It's you turn around and you say, follow me as your last command as a jump master. Then you jump out. And, as opposed to being an AJ or PG in 82nd when you're jumping last, you're the first one out, like, hey, follow me. So that kind of leadership for me, extremely important lessons over time. A lot of great stories about, pushing some people out when they're too scared or just saving people from getting injured, pulling them back, sitting them down, taking them out, unhooking people, or hooking people up who forgot, stuff like that, going down a stick, crazy stuff. But you got a lot of those stories too.
Oh yeah. So tell me about, like, you came in and wore BDUs and black boots at one point.
I did.
Tell me about your favorite uniform.
Man, I'm actually a fan of the DCU. I didn't like how hot it was, but I just have always liked the way it looks. I do remember being a young LT in the 82nd, having my little green jungle boots and having a pressed uniform and stuff like that, and listening to the advice you gave me, not wearing winter uniforms, like those winter BDUs. You couldn't wear them if you wear snivel gear. It had to be, you couldn't be able to see it. Like I remember all of that. But I'm also a fan of the new one, the Army, the AGSU, Army Green Service uniform that we have now. I think it looks sharp. It's kind of throwback-ish. I've had a lot of uniforms over time. We've had a lot of transition in the last 20 years. But man, DCUs. I mean, I have a uniform. As a matter of fact, it was school picture day today for Lola. I have an old BDU uniform that I had changed into a dress, a little girl's dress. She wore that today. It's a 20-year-old BDU top that is turned into a little dress with buttons and the whole nine. She wore that today for her pictures. So BDUs are probably pretty up there. You don't know it, but I have my this is a DCU patch. This is my old. You don't remember this book, but this is the book that I had in OBC that I took notes in. So some of these notes that I'm referring to, that I'm talking about, are right here on the first page from my first set of notes from actually you. You don't remember this. This is where I said I was going to surprise you. You can't read this, but there's a set of notes right here from you. Before I graduated OBC, I sat down with you. We sat down downstairs where the kitchen area was for lunch. And I was like, tell me all the things I need to know as a lieutenant. Like, don't tell me this, like, be a sponge and all, like I know all that. Listen to your platoon sergeant. I knew all that stuff. I was like, tell Chevy what he needs to know. Here's some of the notes you gave me. You ready? I'm dead serious. It's like smudge, but it's written in pencil. You said, don't be passive. You said, find out who you support up the street in 82nd and go and visit, which I did. You said, be humble. It took me a while to get to that lesson, but I got to it. You told me to focus on SOPs and hand receipts. You said, suggest rather than correct. That was a really good one. That was priceless. The way of phrasing it, and like, hey, are we supposed to do it this way? Man, that was really good. You told me about the 2-hour recalls and 3-month cycles and all that stuff. Green Corvette. You told me to make sure I had memorized the oath of enlistment, the Soldier's Creed, and the Air Defense Song. You told me to memorize all of those and don't ever read that stuff off paper. And to this day, I've done almost like 38 re-enlistments, by the way, in my career. I keep track of the numbers because it's important to me to know by those kind of impacts. And I cringe every time I see somebody read the oath of enlistment. Cringe. You told me to make sure I connected with certain folks over in Bravo. You told me to make sure I go to jump master school. And you told this is where the stuff starts getting funny. You told me to jump my own stuff. If I got to carry things, don't ever put it on one of my soldiers. Use the XO instead of just running everything to the company commander or battery commander. This is a good one. You told me to never wear winter uniform in person. And you literally put it in here. You said tuck away your sniffle gear if you're going to wear sniffle gear. But one of the most important lessons that's in here that you gave me was you said be yourself with an asterisk. And I don't know if you remember that. But you were saying, you said, hey, Chevy, or Lieutenant Cook back then. You were like, hey, it doesn't seem like you like to talk about sports a lot or anything like that. It looks like you're like a go-getter and you like to joke a little bit. Yeah, do all of that. Like, be that. Don't try to like start watching Monday Night Football just to like connect with your Joes and stuff like that. Just be yourself, but with an asterisk. If that stuff starts not working, like change tactics. Like, don't be yourself to a fault where you rub people the wrong way or, you get caught, you get stuck in your own way. That was the most priceless piece in here. That one and the suggest rather than correct. I still have it. This is in my office. I went to my office to get this today.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm honored, sir. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I love it. It's been a wonderful time. And you said when we got started that you were going to surprise me, and you did. You did very much, sir. It's very much an honor to know you. You are you're very impactful. You have been for a long time. You have been impactful to me, and it's neat to see that somehow I had an impact on you. And it's you have a wonderful family, and I'm so proud of you, sir. I'll give you the last word, and if you could, I would love. It's kind of a thing. If you could call your maybe fictional unit to attention and sign out. I don't know if you feel comfortable. That would be neat. If not, no big deal. But I'm going to give you the final word.
Well, maybe another piece here is that I'll leave you with is I've told the story of you and your leadership. I'd always talk about Sergeant First Class Marshall from my OBC class and those lessons, especially the one about be yourself with an asterisk 4 years, and you didn't even know it. And it just ties in so much of what we talked about tonight. How people like yourself, you're still doing it. People like yourself, can have such a huge impact with just a couple little phrases, right? Like you are probably the reason I have this nonprofit. One of the reasons, right? In a roundabout way. People see maybe my success or whatever and don't realize the Will Marshalls and the Martys that have like to prop me up and push me forward. So one of my last words, for tonight is like for us to come together tonight, for me to bring this up and us to have a conversation like this is a circling of the universe, pulling us back toward each other. Put us together at one point, push me out. All whatever success and stuff I have is partly due to your efforts. So please keep doing this. Please keep connecting people like this because it's extremely important. And I will always live in your legacy. And if you think I'm a great LTC now, as opposed to just an LT, I will tell you it's because of that Sergeant First Class I knew, now almost a quarter century ago, which is crazy. I guess my call sign now is Axe Hammer 6. That's our battalion is the Axe Hammer. So I guess I will say this is Axe Hammer 6 signing out.
Oh, sir. I love you, sir. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for hanging out. It has been such a blast, right? So many cool stories, and you are a special kind of an American. You are somebody that I'm proud to call my friend, a mentor, and a leader in our country today. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. All the way.
All the way, airborne. All right, let's stop that recording. And that's
Marshall in the